In this update, we've got much cooler conditions really starting to filter in across the Northwest. In fact, some of the higher elevations in Montana could see a lot of snow flying. And then we have more severe storms really starting to break out over the next several days across the upper Midwest. And the heat really starts to build across the Northeast for Monday through Thursday. Then further south, all the tropical moisture that was inundating a good part of southern Florida is going to be finally on the move. Now it's going to be moving westbound into the Bay of Campeche, where it could start to form possibly our first tropical storm of the season by the time we head into the middle of next week. But here's the overall breakdown for the next 5 days. There's the much cooler anomalies really starting to filter in across a good part of the Northwest. Those areas into the higher elevations, likely 5,000 feet or higher into Montana and Idaho, could see some snow, even some pretty good healthy amounts of snow of anywhere from 6 to 12 inches. They're in the middle of the country where we are going to be having more concerns about severe storms, especially for the Dakotas into Minnesota and Iowa. But there is the ridge of high pressure that will be really building across a good part of the Northeast, widespread 90s, even some triple digits sometimes showing up on the map, especially as we head to Monday through Thursday. And then there's the instability that's finally leaving Florida. We'll finally head westbound into the Yucatan, eventually into the Bay of Campeche. That's where lower pressures start to ensue that could lead to our minimal first tropical storm of the season by the time we head into the middle of next week. But on the hazard map, you can see what's happening. Yes, in the blue shaded area, that is your winter storm watches, folks, for portions of Montana. Those areas of 6 to 12 inches, 5,000 feet or higher, could even get a little bit higher than that, possibly 18 inches. Of course, further south, you've got red flag warnings across Utah, and then there's our excessive heat watches across portions of Arizona. But there is the newly advised excessive heat watches for those areas into Ohio, back into West Virginia and Western Pennsylvania. That will only likely to expand as we get deeper into next week. So on the satellite picture, you can see what's happening. We've got more instability really starting to break out where we see that underneath that weakness of the ridge ahead of that cold front. So yes, we are expecting more severe storms across the Dakotas, back into Minnesota and Iowa today. And then there's the moisture that's still coming into southern portions of Florida. Man, they maxed out. One place maxed out at 28 inches of rainfall over the last 6 days, folks. They don't need any more rainfall. So luckily, that is going to be slowly coming to an end, but you can already see it starting to bubble up across the Yucatan. That is the instability that's going to be pushing westbound as a ridge slowly starts to build in. That's going to be pushing that westbound, and eventually could form our first low-end tropical storm of the season. But for the severe storms today, there are several areas to highlight. First, or back into the eastern portions of Montana through the Glasgow region, back into North Dakota through Bismarck, as well as into Rapid City. And then further south, we do have more instability across eastern portions of Nebraska and areas of western portions of Iowa, where those storms could get on the bumpy side as we head into the heat of the afternoon, especially early evening time frame with these as they expand into areas of southern portions of Minnesota. So if you break it down for you over the next 24 hours, you really only have two areas of concern. First is just tropical moisture that's just been inundating a good part of Florida. You can see much of the country's pretty much dry conditions. You just really have these two areas across portions of Montana into the Dakotas, as well as that pocket of energy that's going to be bringing a lot of heavy rainfall through central and southern portions of Minnesota, as well as into Wisconsin and a good part of Iowa over the next 24 hours. And if you go beyond that, there is that ridge that's likely going to start to build across areas of the southeast. And as it does, that's finally going to end the taps down there in Florida. That's the reason why most of this tropical moisture is going to be forced westbound, while we see more weaknesses of the ridge ahead of that cool front And then as we head into Sunday, that's where we're going to be seeing more severe storms, especially for those areas into Rapid City again, back into the Sioux Falls region, as well as into Minneapolis. A lot of the same areas get hit again because you're just in between that high pressure ahead of that cool front from the northwest. And then, of course, you got, not much instability further south. And the only instability is the deep south with any tropical moisture that's going to be likely building as we head into Monday. It's finally going to be on the move. So it's finally going to be leaving Florida by then. Now it's going to be close enough where the outer bands of this deep tropical moisture is likely inundating areas of the deep south, those areas back into southern portions of Mississippi, areas into Louisiana, and eventually swing into those deep south of Texas along the coastline with very heavy rain. So by the time we head into next week, right now the National Hurricane Center does in fact have this a 50% probability within the next, several days or so that this could form into kind of a weak tropical depression or a minimal tropical storm. If it is able to do that, it'll take the name Alberto, but most indications are this would likely make landfall somewhere into the Mexico vicinity, while the outer bands reach inland well north into the Texas coastline, as the ridge will be likely expanding by the time we head into Tuesday. Man, that really dominating ridge across a good part of the Carolinas and a good part of the Northeast, much of the mid-Atlantic states and the Northeast. We've got a lot of record-breaking temperatures likely unfolding by then, while we're watching tropical moisture really building by then into the deep southern portions of the Gulf of Mexico down there into the Bay of Campeche. So let's talk about some of these record high temperatures. So yeah, it's not record highs. It's much cooler conditions underneath that very strong cold front into Idaho, as well as in Montana. That's where the snow would likely fall. But everywhere else, we could be looking at 41 record high temperatures for all those areas into the circles. And it's mainly across a good part of Ohio and to the Northeast. You can see so many widespread 90s. It's kind of dotting up the map here. Some of these areas, isolated areas, could reach triple digit temperatures. It's not out of the question, with numerous records unfolding, not just on Tuesday, but also on Wednesday, another 44. So you have potentially 85 record high temperatures just on Tuesday and Wednesday alone, as the heat really starts to build across a good part of the Northeast. I mean, look at that. There are some triple digits starting to show up in the map into areas of Vermont and New Hampshire. But look at Caribou, Maine, 96 degrees. You know it's hot when it's hotter than Caribou than in Texas, folks. That is a heat wave, all right? So that's a record-breaking heat wave across a good part of the Northeast. But across the Northwest, where it's equally high pressure across the Northeast, you got equally low pressure across the Northwest, and that's where snow will be flying. Only higher elevations, but once you reach 5,000 feet or higher, you're likely going to be running into snow up there across a good part of Idaho, as well as into Montana. Some of those areas, 6 to 12 inches, not out of the question. Could even reach a little bit higher than that, especially Monday and Tuesday timeframe. But going into Wednesday, that's where we have to look out for if we are going to get, that minimal tropical depression or a minimal tropical storm. Either way, it doesn't matter if it takes the name or not. It would take the name Alberto. It's a very small chance. Even if it does, it's only going to be possibly a named storm for even like less than 24 hours before it makes landfall into Mexico. But it's going to be spreading the the outer bands in a good part of especially the deep south of Louisiana and the Texas coastline there, with actually much needed rain for the further south, especially as you get into Corpus and to the Rio Grande Valley region. So here it is. Here's the setup on Wednesday. You still got the ridge of high pressure really dominating across a good part of the Northeast. You've got that cool boundary. That's where all the heavy rain's going to fall this week across the northern tier. And then the tropical rains will impact the deep south, likely into Louisiana by then, especially those areas into southeast Texas, the Houston area, Galveston, Victoria, spreading into Corpus Christi. A little bit lighter amounts you go into central Texas. It's probably not going to really reach North Texas, and especially into Oklahoma. It's just not going to reach that far, especially with the system going into Mexico. But there's the system on Thursday, would continue to push off westbound, really helping these drought-stricken areas. These are the areas that are under that severe drought. So yes, a lot of areas have got a lot of welcome rain in Texas, but there are certain areas still are under that severe drought. So this is definitely some welcome rains across this region going into Wednesday and Thursday. But then I think we have yet more tropical weather, tropical kind of moisture, coming back, because the Caribbean stays fairly active as far as tropical moisture goes. And then you get these outer bands that will likely spread back into Florida again with more tropical rains, even heading into the weekend. So if we break it down for the next 7 days, you can see where the cooler anomalies is with that cold front. It likely keeps most of the colder air across a good part of Washington and Oregon and those northern areas of California into Nevada, northern portions of Utah, especially into Idaho and Montana where the snow is going to be flying, and then lighter, cooler conditions where that instability is with that severe storms, and that's where the clash in temperatures, that's where most of the severe storms will likely unfold this week. Then away from that, it's just going to be that record heat across a good part of the Great Lakes into the Ohio Valley, into the mid-Atlantic, and especially into the Northeast. And then there's the weakness with that tropical rains and the cooler anomalies, if not normal anomalies, where you're just going to see some of those tropical light rainfall in the week ahead. And so if we break down the rainfall, you can see the dry slot for a good part of the West. It's just really where the cool boundary is across areas of Idaho and Montana, where the snow would likely fall, and some chillier rains as well. But it's really just this area right here across a good part of the Dakotas into Nebraska, Iowa, and especially Minnesota and Wisconsin. They have the bullseye this week with easily likely 2, 4, maybe even 6 inches of rainfall. Then, of course, under that ridge of high pressure for a good part of the Northeast, you'll be high and dry in the week ahead. And it's just those areas further south. Florida likely gets a break, especially after today. But all that deep tropical moisture just spreads westbound, likely inundating the good part of the deep south, especially along the coastal areas, I-10, I-20 areas, into Mississippi, Louisiana, into the deep south of Texas, and spreading into the Rio Grande Valley region with definitely some welcome rains, especially Wednesday into Thursday. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to my channel and catch me next update while I protect you before and after the storm.